Hello and welcome to Corgi Town, USA. I am Candy. In my lap is Chuckles, our spokescorg.
Hi, I'm Catherine. On my left is Digby, my
Awesome.
sport, and on my right is Calabria, the honorary corgi slash she's really a cattle dog.
And in the studio, or out right outside the studio, we have Mortimer Barnabas, Tito Bandito, and little Gilda, the newest member of the Corgi Committee. If you're new here, hi, welcome. We are here all about corgi lifestyle, pet parent lifestyle. We try to bring you information when it comes to training, grooming, health of your pets, basically enriching your dog's life and enriching your life with your dog. And of course, your cats, because we have to mention cats because Cat is a cat lady.
Cat is the cat. Cat is my. I aspire to be the crazy cat lady someday.
I think you've achieved it.
Over time, but I've only got two. Some
Yeah.
people I know have four corgis, so there you have it.
Being called out already.
Yep.
If you're not new here, thank you so much for listening and being part of this. We're now in our 7th season. We have
Unbelievable.
over 140 episodes. There's a lot of history here of us trying to be a guide, or being a guide and being part of this community and trying to lift everyone up, be a source of information. And we love to hear your voice. So please like and subscribe. And if you want to check out our old episodes, we love feedback. So if there's something you want to hear about, or something we haven't tackled, or maybe even you disagree with us, we want to hear that too. We're all about perspective here. So if you think Cat and Candy, you're wrong on something, let us know. We would love to talk about it. We love to have a good
Absolutely.
harangue about these things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But we have a special guest today, as we often usually do. If you follow Winston on Instagram, then you're going to be very excited. If you don't, then you should. But please welcome Bella, Winston's mom. Welcome.
Thank you, Candy. Thank you, Kat. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate you taking the time. And you're joining us from the UK. So we have about a half a day between us. I think you're living in the future.
Yes.
I am, yeah. It's great here.
Well,
It's
we appreciate you and would love to hear if you please tell us, kind of just give us an introduction, kind of why we invited you on the show, and then just sort of talk about your history, basically how we came to today with Bella and Winston.
Of course, I would love to. So my relationship with corgis started actually thanks to my husband, who was obsessed with corgis for a very long time. Just following them, the Reddit thread, the Corgi kind of Reddit forum, and following them on Instagram and things like that, and just loving corgis. And as I was deciding that I wanted to stop my full-time job and go freelance, which was 2018, the beginning of 2019, I started thinking, well, this is the first time that I will be working from home full-time if I do make the decision to go freelance. So this is the perfect time to start thinking about getting a dog. But we've always been very strong in our belief that we would rather rehome a dog than get a puppy. And so I began to investigate end of 2018, early 2019, whether that would be possible to rescue a corgi. I didn't know much about the breed. I just knew that my husband loved them. So I thought that would be a good place to start. And actually, funnily enough, in that research, I realized that while they are very, very popular in the US, corgis, and there are a lot more corgi breeders in the US, there's a lot more corgi rescues as a result in the US. They're not so popular in the UK, which is very bizarre because you'd think that the Queen, the late Queen, started the obsession, or at least carried on the obsession in a big way. So yeah, it was slightly odd. However, I actually did find mid kind of 2019, I found this website, the Welsh Corgi Rescue Service, and it looked like it hadn't been updated, this website, in 15 years. I thought this website will not be working, but it did say that it helped connect owners with corgis, with rescue corgis. But it did say on the website that it was, the wait list was long, and it wasn't that likely that you would get paired up with a corgi anytime soon. And if you would be paired up, then it's likely that they would be older, just purely because there aren't that many rescue corgis in the UK. Anyway, I did eventually go freelance at the end of 2019. And it was all very lovely and serendipitous. And just about the time that I went freelance, I got a call from a lady that ran this website, ran this Welsh Corgi rescue service, saying that there were two brothers, one of whom would be perfect to come and live in London in an apartment, because my husband and I were in a slightly unique situation where we were not living in the countryside with lots of land. We were in a small flat in London. And she said one of the brothers would be perfect for that setup. So we got checked out. One of the ladies at the Welsh Corgi Rescue Service came to check whether it was suitable. We do have a communal garden, which worked. Anyway, fast forward to January 2019, we picked Winston up. And it was wonderful. Little did we know that the world was about to change a couple of months later, and we went into lockdown. And so my rehoming story with Winston is slightly unique in that almost immediately we both ended up spending all of our time together living at home. So it was an unusual setup, but the rest is history. And since 2020, since we brought him home, if I said 2019, I meant, since January 2020, since I brought him home, it has been wonderful. He was just over a year old when we brought him home. And in that time, I have found out a lot about corgis, learned a lot about them. There's a lot of misinformation online, which is, coming onto this podcast and talking to you two, I know that is so much of what you do, is dispelling myths and sharing education and making other corgi owners feel like things are okay, and dispelling misinformation. And that's kind of what I wanted to do when I set up Corgi Companion, which is a newsletter, which goes out every week to more than 5,000 subscribers at this point. And
congratulations.
Say that again, Candy.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Well, yes, I set that up in 2024. So at this point, it's a lot of corgi owners. But yes, I will stop there. But that is kind of the potted history of how I got here today.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you for rescuing, and that's a big deal with me as a foster, and I love the rescue, and I love that you got the corgi or got the fur baby just in general before COVID. Unfortunately, we know from a lot of our rescue friends that some of those COVID babies were just COVID babies, and that's super sad. That you went in with the true intention of, I need a child, and said child must have fur, and said child must have little short stumpy legs. So I love that story about how, and I think it's hysterical. If your husband loves the corgi, your husband loves the corgi, your husband loves the corgi. Oh, you got the corgi.
Yeah.
And we're certainly pro rescue here.
Yep.
Cat fosters. I've had 9 corgis over 20 years, and just over half of them have been rescues.
Yeah.
I have breeder purchase as well. And I love that you talk about how they're not as popular in the UK, and that's surprising. We learned that from our friends Corgis of Eton. They have Honey Jam and Snowden, and such a nice couple, and they've been on the show a couple of times, and they kind of told us the same thing. And much of what you're talking about with the popularity, and our friend Esther Giuliani, she's a breeder in Italy, she said that they're pretty fashionable there as well. And kind of your experience, it kind of makes my heart feel a little warm that they're not as popular when it comes to your rehoming that you're talking about, because here in the States, where the rescues, the shelters, they're completely full. That's across all the breeds. But even our purebred Welsh Pembroke Corgis, when the popularity happens, and this is any breed, anytime we've had, famous show, there was Rin Tin Tin years and years and years ago, decades ago. Now I think Belgian Malinois are picking up in popularity because they're hitting the media, which is a very serious working dog. They're not exactly house pets. But anytime a breed becomes popular, it winds up with people recognize, oh, I could make some money here. And so we end up having a lot of just unsavory breeding practices. People see the cute pictures and videos on Instagram. And of course, all of us that have corgis know they take a specific type of training. They need a strong leader.
Yeah.
They need very clear boundaries.
Yeah.
And you want to let them run and be a maniac because it's very fulfilling to them. But they need to be shown when and where that's appropriate. And that's the part that doesn't necessarily get out as much. And so you get a lot of people who say, "Oh, what a cute dog. I want that type of dog." And then they get it. They're, what in the world did I sign up for? And like Kat was saying, after COVID, people's lives changed. And so it just winds up being this amalgam of situations where dogs need homes, and our rescues are always full. And I'm part of a network that there's always somebody looking for a corgi, but the need supersedes the opportunities. So there's always corgis that need homes. And generally speaking, we're very pro responsible breeding for a lot of obvious reasons. But a big part of that is the ones that come from reputable programs where it's been genetic testing has been done, and there's puppy culture. And basically we feel like breeding needs to be left to the professionals. It's not a hobby. It needs to be someone who studies and does the science and knows the breed and is very informed on temperament, because those dogs don't wind up in shelter and rescue. They're easy to place. Someone made financial and time investments in them. Someone who bought from someone's neighbor that had a litter, or a backyard hobbyist, they kind of churn them out. They don't pay as much attention to genetic health. They don't pay as much attention to temperament. And so almost always when they wind up in rescue, they have health problems and almost always behavioral problems. I get a lot of those calls as a trainer. My corgi is a biter. My corgi is very reactive, those types of things. So I love what you're doing. This is such a great piece of information across, and we'll be sure and tell everyone. We have more people that listen than watch. So before we let you go today, we'll definitely have you tell everyone how to follow you and follow your newsletter. And of course, we will put those links in the description box of this episode as well.
Thank you.
So Bella, I'm curious. Your newsletter is about you and Winston and Life of the Corgi, which I love the realism. Candy and I do a good job of the realism with the Corgi, or really any pet, So I also have a cattle dog, which is also a herding breed. Maybe someday I'll get a little Chihuahua and just be calm, but that's probably not going to happen. Seriously though, in the UK, they're not as popular, so you probably don't have as many breeders. Are there more guidelines, not just for corgis, but for breeding in general, for people who are doing this for a living, not just backyard, but
is it regulated? You mean?
Yeah,
is that your question?
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know how highly regulated it is in the US, but it certainly is. It certainly is here, and I think. I don't know. We definitely do have puppy farms and backyard breeders and things like that. But I think it is on a slightly. I think maybe just because of the size of the country, I think it is on a smaller scale. And generally, the professional breeders, there aren't as many of them, but they are. It is very regulated, yeah. And it's similar. You have the US Kennel Club, the American Kennel Club. We have the British Kennel Club. So yes, and the official breeders, I guess you want to call them, have to abide by the Kennel Club standards, which I personally don't agree with all the standards always in these,
Sure.
bodies. But yes, it is regulated. Yes.
Okay.
And to your point, same with us. Our stance is more. We always say at the very minimum. Here in the States, the pups should be AKC registered, and both dam and sire should be AKC registered at the very minimum. But the reason why is not because we necessarily agree with everything AKC has a stance on. The reason why we think it's important is because you can trace lineage.
Yeah.
And it's a very basic thing to have your kennel registered. If you're not registered with some sort of kennel, it's off the rails. You don't know if they're crossbred. Just all kinds of things. And so we're with you. We're always on the side of the dog. What
Mhm.
is best for the health and the well-being of the dog? And that's where we think those points are most important, and I'm sure you are too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I like the dogs. I like cats better than the humans, but that's a whole other show. Um,
Cats
so
can have me
Bella,
editing again.
no, that's just a cute remark. Bella, what in addition to you talking about the different rescues um, and your life with Winston, um, what else? You know, there I we talked off camera a little bit about some of the stories that you talked about in the newsletter. Can you give us like a really super heartwarming story?
Yes, I can. I'm thinking let's think of a heartwarming one. I've got at the front of my mind right now. I did a call out on my newsletter last week about not super heartwarming, but super like incredible kind of health stories and journeys. So I'll give one of those. Heartwarming. Actually, this morning I was talking to a reader who he is based in Europe. I don't actually know where. I asked him to clarify, but he had a camper van. And I say he had because he sent in a photo of his beautiful Pembroke Corgi, who is no longer with us, called Poppy. And she looked like a fluffy, he didn't say, but she was, anyway, she had like very gorgeous long hair. And he said that sadly she passed away a couple of years ago from cancer, but he was her most recent corgi, and he said she was the loveliest, had the best temperament of all the corgis that he'd had. And a few years before she passed away, him and his wife had this, he called it this touring camper van, and they drove around Europe and just stopping off in various cities, including Valencia in Spain, which is where me and my husband and Winston spent 3 months in 2024. And he said it was just wonderful, stopping around all these places in Europe with his corgi Poppy. Everybody, everywhere that he went around Europe. I mean, I think probably because he went to a lot of cities, not Valencia, but he went to a lot of cities where they hadn't seen a corgi, and there weren't that many of them. And he said it was just wonderful, and they were on this adventure around Europe together. And yeah, it was just very heartwarming, especially because Robbie, my husband, and I have been lucky enough to go on a few European trips with Winston. And as I'm sure both of you know, whenever, even if you get to go not very far afield, but with your beloved animals, it's lovely to share those experiences with them. And so yes, that was probably the most recent heartwarming story.
Well,
Aw,
that's
I love it.
wonderful. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I love that you talk about that traveling. We talk a lot about traveling with your corgi, and I think in the UK it's similar, but in the US we're starting to have a little bit more freedom when it comes to traveling with dogs specifically. And part of Corgi Town USA, we're doing some partnerships and things on some like filming location tours where you can bring your dog so you can recreate the scene and take the pictures. And it's one of my favorite projects to work on. But it's getting easier to travel with dogs. It used to be that they were sort of frowned upon in public unless it was a service dog or had some sort of therapy function. They were kind of not supposed to be seen in public a lot of places.
Yeah.
And that's changing. There's more and more people like us that are like, you know what? If my dog can't come, why would I even want to go?
Yeah.
I think it's definitely easier in the US because I speak to friends in the US who have dogs. And I think even it's easier, maybe not the easiest, but it definitely seems to be easier to get internal flights in the US with dogs than it is in Europe. It's very difficult, and they do still have to be a service dog, or you can put them in the hold, but not many airlines allow that. So it's a challenge, but I suppose what we do have on our side is being able to get in a car if we can and drive across Europe with our, as long as we have a pet passport or a health certificate, it's relatively easy. So yes, but you're right though. It definitely, even in the last few years, I've noticed more campaigns around getting dogs on the Eurotunnel, for example, and it's definitely something that's getting more acceptable than it was a few years ago.
I
Okay.
personally love that part of social
Yeah.
evolution. And I
Mhm.
think that it also needs to be said, however, since we're talking about it, how important training is.
Yes.
Not just
Yes.
because I'm a dog trainer, but part of the reason, of course, is health, is why there's a whole camp, and we've done episodes on it, dog friendly versus not dog friendly. there
Yeah.
is a camp of people who are like, I don't like dogs popping up more and more in society and in public. They should be left at home. There is obviously that's not us, but
Mhm.
there is that camp of opinion, and respectfully, I completely honor that. I
Mhm.
understand not everyone is a big dog lover like we are here at Corgi Town USA and myself, and
Mhm.
we want to respect that, and we don't want to encroach on that. And so that's why it's so important that you train your dog how to behave in public, because not all dogs are going to love to be around in public with different sights, different smells, different sounds, other dogs, a lot of
Yeah.
people they don't know. Some dogs, most corgis are pretty social and they're pretty confident, but every dog needs to be trained on what's expected of them to behave in those environments. If
Mhm.
the dog's completely unruly, that's on the handler. That's on the I don't like to say owner, even though that's technically I like to stick to like parent,
Mhm. Mhm.
but that's completely on the handler that you have to work with your dog. And
Yes.
I wanted to ask you a question. We talked about when you obtained Winston, and you had mentioned something about getting him to settle in his environment. And I know in rescue we talk about the 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months. That's kind of the evolution of I'm safe. This is my new routine. And
Mhm.
then there's sort of that window of time to, okay, I'm not going anywhere. I can start to let my personality show. So I'd love to hear you talk about that.
Yes, as I mentioned, it was a unique situation in that we brought Winston home at the end of January, and then less than 2 months later, we were locked down. So I guess it was normal in the beginning, like lots of other people who bring home their rescues with that three week phase, certainly, where I'm casting my mind back to those first few weeks where it was very overwhelming. I remember bringing him, I was very overwhelmed. I remember looking at him thinking, I can't go anywhere now without, and it obviously it's wonderful and I'm so happy, but it was
Sure.
that realization that you're like, wow, you are so dependent on me now. And Winston's backstory was that he'd been locked in a kitchen with his brother all day long, and he didn't have much socialization. And even today, he is not that confident with other dogs. He gets on very well with other corgis because he was with his brother all day long, but other dogs he's very afraid of. And so those first few weeks, it was a lot of he was fearful, and he spent a lot of time almost from the beginning, though I suppose unsurprisingly, as corgis are quite Velcro dogs anyway. I mean, I'm not sure if Winston is like every other corgi. Apparently, he is, in that I hear that other corgis, they want to be with you and on you, but not necessarily. It's on their terms. So
Yes.
me trying to grab him and hug him, it's not always his favorite, though he does want to be right beside me all the time. And almost immediately, yeah, it was the right at the ankles, my shadow everywhere. And what I wish I'd done differently, and what I tell people now, is that had things been different and had there not perhaps been a lockdown, we were training him and we were doing that to the best of our ability at home and with the limited time that we had outside in those first few months. If there hadn't been a lockdown, I think I definitely would have considered, now with hindsight, done training classes or done training lessons with a professional trainer, and I can absolutely still do that. Or maybe go to kind of socialization classes for slightly older dogs, because when we brought him home, he was so well behaved because he had been quite well trained with his previous owner. But I suppose I missed that just because he was well behaved, there were certain training elements that there were certain things he didn't know, and he hadn't been very well socialized. And I think because he was over a year old, I think I thought a lot of that work had been done. And so we've spent the last few years him unlearning things and training him, kind of training him. And I wish I'd done some of that sooner. And obviously, circumstances were very unusual. Um, but yes, so that's definitely something I would have done differently, had there not been a pandemic at the time. But
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I mean, that's everyone, right? And when I get training clients, I hear often that there's always limitations. In the chronic illness world, we call it spoons. You only have so many spoons per day that you start with, and that's your energy level, and that's emotional energy, right? That's physical energy, that's mental energy. and you only have so much. All humans have this. So we have a short window. We can't give all of ourselves all the time to our
Right.
world. We have to pull inward. And I say that to talk about when it comes to training, the limitation that I hear most often is, well, we only have so much time to practice this, because I tell everyone, you come to me, we have a lesson, we spend an hour working on different types of, if it's cues that we want to learn and desensitization and socialization, but the magic is in the practice. You come to me for the lesson, I show you how we do it, we practice, and then you go and practice. And I hear often that we have limited time. We have a job, we might have other kids in the home, maybe we have other dogs in the home, other pets, we have family, we have all these obligations as humans. But our dog, we are their whole world.
Mm.
And we that's I hear that, and I always tell people, don't get overwhelmed. You can practice in very short windows.
Mm.
Just teach the dog with clear boundaries and have them understand, create predictable patterns so that they know that they're safe and they respect your leadership.
Mm.
And so when you say that, I hear that, and I think that you did a wonderful job, because what you did is you put his perspective first of, oh, he's having an experience. And you being new to being a corgi mom, you couldn't really predict that, right?
Mhm.
You just said, "Oh, wow, he's so well behaved. I hit
Mhm.
the jackpot with this rescue."
Yep. Yeah.
So, I think that you did a wonderful job, just considering that. And socialization and desensitization can be done at any age.
Mhm.
Obviously, the longer that goes on, dogs like humans build neural pathways.
Yeah.
So it's all about building new neural pathways. And the older the dog is, the more set they are in those ways of those old neural pathways. So it can be
Mhm.
a little bit more challenging getting them to acquiesce. And one of my favorite things that I've ever heard say is my father, who's a teacher, said, learning is stressful.
Mm.
Yeah.
We don't think his learning is stressful, but it is. But it's stressful for the dog, and it's stressful for the human as well, right? We have to learn these new interactions with our dog. So,
Mhm.
long road to a simple thought in true candy fashion. But I just wanted to validate you there and say, I think your head was certainly in the right place. You've done a wonderful job, and it's never too late to keep up that work.
No.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Bella, I wanted to ask you a question about working with the rescues. As you said, there aren't a lot in the UK. Um, there's the whole area of Greater Europe, and it is, for our, dear listener, dear viewer, who is not that familiar. I mean, we look at maps, but unless you've been there and see how close things are together, you don't really have a sense of how close things are together. Um, do you work with other rescues mainland Europe? Are you expanding out to being able to help people almost anywhere in Europe?
So at the moment it isn't really in Europe, to be honest. It's mostly I do some work with the Welsh Corgi Rescue Service that we got Winston from. And when I say, well, I mean um and kind of I support them
Yeah.
and I regularly share what they're doing. But again, there aren't that many rescue organizations elsewhere in Europe. What seems to happen is there seems to be a lot of organizations that are connecting China to the US and the UK and Europe. So a lot of rescue corgis from China will be sent to either the US or the UK, and then they can be rehomed elsewhere in Europe. But it seems like the US and the UK are kind of the main destinations for
Okay.
corgis from that are rescued from dog meat markets in China. That seems to be where a lot of rescues, corgi rescues, come from. Certainly coming, yeah, into the UK. Yeah, but no, there's not that many in Europe, and I often get readers asking me, writing into the newsletter, saying I'm based in Spain or I'm based in Italy or wherever, and usually what has to happen is they have to come to the UK to get a rescue that's coming
Okay.
from China or elsewhere. Yeah.
I feel like we could do an entire episode about that. So maybe
Yeah.
Bella, if you're open to it, it's not a subject we like to think about, but
No,
maybe
oh yeah, that's a whole other
Yeah.
yeah, maybe to
conversation.
come back on and we can do a whole episode about that, because I feel like many people are aware that it exists, and in Western culture, that's pearl clutching. We're aghast. How in the
Mm,
world could you eat a pet? And there's all this philosophy around that. But I would love to do in the future, if you're open to it, an episode about that to educate people on what really goes on and
yeah,
more about these wonderful people that essentially risk their lives to save these animals from that. It's
yeah.
really quite amazing.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, no, definitely. We should talk about that. Yeah, because they are doing incredible work, and yeah, and as you say, for not much in return except that they absolutely love these animals and getting them rehomed. So yes, let's have a chat about that.
Yeah, and that's
Absolutely. Yeah.
much to the chagrin of the others that are trying to make money this way.
Mm.
So I
Mhm.
can't imagine, yeah, nothing about that entire process is easy, but I'm glad that you mentioned it, and I know it's a concern. So when we talk about your reader stories, this is part of your newsletter, and uh, I know Kat had you mention a favorite, but do you feel like with your reader stories, like this is kind of shared collective of perspective? Was that kind of the point of view that you were going with that?
Yes, I think one of the things that the reader stories has taught me is that everybody is worried. I mean, when I sent a survey out a few months ago saying, and within the questions it was, what is your number one concern about your corgi, or what's the one thing you're worried about? And almost everyone, and it's kind of an open question, everybody says the longevity of my corgi and how can I make sure that they are as healthy as they can be. And I from my own experiences, I had a lot of questions, and then starting this newsletter, sharing my thoughts, my questions, getting those questions back. Perhaps unsurprisingly, we are all thinking and worrying about similar things. We're not necessarily always going about things in the same way, or I don't know, the way that we'd agree, that we'd collectively agree things should be done. But we're all worried about the same thing, and there's huge comfort in that, and relatability in that, and that's I think why every day I'm getting emails from people saying thank you for answering that question or posing that or talking about someone else's story, because that made me go and have a conversation with my vet, or it made me rethink my corgi's diet, or whatever it may be. So yes, I think that's the purpose of the newsletter. The reason why I set it up has been the reason why it's continued to grow, and it's why I love doing it, and I think it's why it's resonating with so many people, is that we're
Yeah.
all we're all in the same boat, and we've all got similar worries and questions. And yeah.
I think that whole diet question is huge because I don't know about the UK, but over here we see all kinds of advertisements for different brands of whole food dog food, and every celebrity and their uncle
Mm-hmm.
has their own brand of dog food. And it, I personally, I have to make food for my cats because when your male cat, and there's a whole thing behind that, but when your male cat was in emergency vet twice in a row, like vet, week and a half later, emergency vet to clear crystals out of their urethra,
Mm-hmm.
making his food versus I looked at the special diet, and there's so many chemicals in that, it's unreal. And but I don't do that for my dogs. I'll be perfectly honest. I don't do that for my dogs, and I feel guilty. I'm
I
looking for a way to be
I
able to
think
do.
the guilt is unfounded, Kat. And again, we've wanted to do episodes on, and food is just a part of it, right?
Right, the food is just a
It's all
part of it, but
it's also about, help with exercise and what kind of exercises are right for your breed of dog. And it was just such a huge funnel of information. What kind of emotional health of your pet, right? We talked about
yeah,
socializing, and sometimes that's really stressful for some dogs and may not be the best way. There are different ways of training, but we'd love to do more episodes on food.
yeah, no,
However, my
well, it's just the point I was getting to is, there's there is that constant. I think just like just like any parent, there's that constant, am I giving them the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? And we can only do as much as we do the best that we can with what we have.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that is such a popular question. How do I have my dog live a little bit longer? And
Well, and Kat, to your point, when you brought up food, what I wanted to say about that was that, we've wanted to do episodes on food. The problem is because there is so much information. No one can seem to agree so far. There's a lot of science, a lot of reports, there's just a lot of information, and it doesn't always track to the same conclusion.
No.
And even quote unquote experts don't always agree.
No.
Raw versus this, the ills of commercial food versus
Mhm.
whole versus raw versus vegan. It is such a huge funnel of information. So we've kind of stayed away from that on the show because we don't want to give out wrong information or say that we're subscribed to one. I think we're, working with your vet is the best way that we say, how's the dog looking? Is their weight good? Is their energy level good? Right? Like it's more focusing on that. But since you said that, I would love to ask you, Bella, talking about health and longevity and that being a big question you get.
Yeah.
What do you think, if you could maybe pick out one or two things, is the biggest surprise that you learned when it comes to health and longevity based on what you've learned so far? Is there anything that kind of surprised you or caught you out of left field?
It's funny. We could have a whole conversation about food. And I've been on my own journey with Winston over the last, not that long, maybe 6-7 months, where when I first brought Winston, so about 8 months after we brought Winston home, he was vomiting a lot suddenly. And I initially thought it was he picked something up from the park, whatever. Anyway, it turned out the vet said that he had a grain allergy, and she recommended that he go on hypoallergenic food. And I put him on hypoallergenic food, Royal Canin, which I think is Hill's Science in the US. And he was on that, and he had been on that happily for several years since I made that change. And then I started doing reading, and long story short, I started making his food myself, and I've gotten into a system with it, and I batch make it once a month, a month's worth of food. And it's a fairly simple recipe, but I've done like a lot of research. Like I said, we can have a whole other conversation about it. And I top it every meal. He has a nutritional, it's a nutritional powder for dogs. Anyway, I think I've been on a real journey over the last year of understanding more than I thought I did, or at least realizing when I thought I knew a lot about nutrition and health and just how important it is what they're eating. And I think I value what I put inside of myself so much, and making sure that it's fresh. And I love bad food as well, but I try to limit the processed food that I eat. And I was looking at what I was giving Winston day in and day out. And don't get me wrong, he acted as though that bowl of kibble was the first time he'd ever seen it every time he went down on the floor. He absolutely loved it and was overjoyed with it. But I just thought, I think I can be giving you something that's fresher and better for you. So anyway, we've gone on a journey with that, and he loves it. And since I've been feeding it, he's had vet trips. The vet thinks he looks great. He's had checkovers. And he was healthy before, but he's even healthier. He's great. He's doing great now. So I think food, and unsurprisingly with corgis and their weight, and certainly something I've learned from a lot of my readers, is that just making sure they are not overweight is the biggest thing. And I've had a lot of readers write in and say they've been on a journey of, they thought their corgi was at a good weight, and actually they weren't. They were overweight. And the amount of changes and the benefits that they saw once that corgi had lost a few pounds was amazing. And so that's usually where most of the issues seem to start. But just based on my readers, is that if you just cut down a bit with the weight, so many other things will improve. And I think it's very difficult when we are consumed by social media and what you see on social media. And I feel very passionately about we often see the sweet corgi videos of them being lovingly referred to as a chonk, and I do that as well. But the slightly, sometimes what I see certainly on my feed is overweight corgis. That people believe don't exercise and are lazy and are loafs and don't need lots of mental stimulation as well as physical. Yeah, so I think the weight tied with the food is probably the biggest thing. I kind of was aware of it before, but it certainly seems to be the thing that most corgi owners are struggling with. Yeah,
I feel like it's that with people too.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, I'm struggling with that.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's only corgi owners, but yeah, that is an amazing point, Bella. Thank you so much for that. It's the weight. It's always the weight, and you know, and my husband and I are on a journey now. I look at the corgis, or I look at the corgi and the cattle, and okay, do you have that little waist that's indicative of you're doing good? I look at my cats, and you know, what does your weight look like? So yeah, I think across the board.
It's certainly an important issue, and I will advocate as women, as humans, we talk about weight being a problem, and but we also, most of us women understand how hard it is to keep your weight down. It has nothing to do with being lazy. Most of us count calories and are very mindful of what goes into our bodies and how much we're moving our bodies and still struggle with it. So I will also advocate for the dogs in that, having had 9 corgis over 20 years, generally what I've noticed is when they're puppies, you can't really keep weight on them. It's like, wow, they're too skinny. I feel like they need all the calories, they need all this nutrition as puppies. And then they hit this point in maturity where you can't get weight off of them, where it all hangs on. And part of that, I think, is the dwarfism. As a human, if you're shorter, you are going to carry weight more easily. 10 pounds is going to look a lot more on you than it is your taller friend. And as a dog, it's the same. They have a very small window of being a healthy weight because they're so short in stature. And it is a careful balance. The exercise, the calories, the nutrition. And we could go way into that, right? Like that's a whole other episode.
That's a whole other episode.
And they're also incredibly intelligent. And I have readers write in and say, but they could keep eating, and they look at me like they're starving, and I'm like, I know.
Don't fall for it.
They are never full. They are never full. But no, I completely agree with you. It is a balancing act, and it's definitely their stature comes into it. And I think that's why it's not that easy always. And I never want any owners to feel guilty or bad or anything like that. And I also think, especially, I mean, I don't know what it's like in the US, but here, you know, there are some dog food brands that are packed full of carbohydrates and aren't the healthiest. And so it's about feeling empowered to understand what we're feeding our corgis as well. And yeah, it's a lot. You don't think when you go and get a dog or a puppy, certainly, that there's all this other information that you're going to need to know and you're going to start to uncover. And yeah, it's a lot. I think that's why it's nice to have a community, a cult, where we can talk about it honestly and openly without guilt or judgment or
Absolutely. And to your point, this is part of the evolution of society. And a lot of behaviorists agree that there's this evolution in dogs, in that our lives have changed drastically in a very short window of time when it comes to evolutionary calendar. And same with information. 30 years ago, you get a dog, you go to the supermarket, you pick up the kibble, you feed the dog the kibble, he's happy, he looks good, right? It's not that cut and dry anymore.
No.
Yeah, we've learned more about nutrition, and again, there's a lot to food, but kibble was really made for humans' convenience. It wasn't really made for the dog.
No.
But what I will say is, yes, you are correct. There are some that are like good, better, best, and then of course worst, bad. Probably should avoid it. And there's always that gambit, but so much of it is marketing. And I will say this: I don't want to demonize kibble. I feed kibble. I feed a high quality, limited ingredient kibble, but I do teach puppy classes at a commercial dog store that is corporate owned, so they have locations everywhere. I am not convinced that there's maybe 3 to 5 major manufacturers that are just repurchasing and putting their own branding on it.
Yeah, I would
So
agree.
I don't think that and this is complete conjecture from me. Let me qualify that. I don't have any papers or research or proof. This is just based on my own experience of observation. I'm fairly certain that there's not as much variety in manufacturing as we would like to think. I think a lot of it is marketing. You get the bag, you get the pretty letters, you put the couple of drops of vitamins in it, and now it's your brand. That's kind of my observation. But that to say all that to say the good thing about kibble is that they do hire nutritionists at these companies that do make them well balanced.
Yeah.
So at least you're getting, the basic nutrition that your pet needs. But again, we could go right into that, Bella. I feel like for days we could talk about that.
That's it. Yeah.
But I love that you've come up with a good formula for Winston that he's doing well on. And we don't want to keep you any more away from your evening. We know you have a whole life outside of doing our podcast, but we appreciate your time so much, and we would love to have you back on, and we can pick a few subjects that we can talk about. In the meantime, we are going to share some links in the description box of this episode in both YouTube as well as the audio links. But can you please tell those listening how they can both follow Winston and follow your newsletter?
Yes. So Winston's Instagram is WinstonBearOfficial. WinstonBearOfficial. And that is his that's his TikTok as well. Yeah, his nickname is Winston Bear, so we thought we'd WinstonBearOfficial. And Corgi Companion is CorgiCompanion.com. So it's easy. So yeah, that's how you can subscribe to the newsletter.
So that's Winston Bear Official on Instagram and CorgiCompanion.com. Highly recommend you subscribe to this. It sounds like Bella's doing a wonderful job of the collective of what we're facing as pet parents and what our concerns are, and kind of getting that information circulated. And thank you so much. It's a joy to get connected with you and just be partners, bring you in on this information.
It's been lovely speaking to you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Stay warm out there in the UK.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe to Winston Bear Official and check out CorgiCompanion.com. We're excited that this is another source of information for you, dear listener, dear viewer, to help you have the healthiest, happiest life with your pet. Candy and Chuckles are going to sign off, as well as the rest of the Corgi committee.
Yes, and Catherine and Digby and Calabria, and in the house are Star-Lord and Naboo, my beautiful kitties. We are going to sign off as well.
No foster dogs this week, Kat?
No, too much travel. Right now, I am a foster relief mama. So if somebody needs to go away or, is doing something for a few days, I'm going to play foster relief and take them in. But we've got too much travel ahead, including an amazing trip to Italy. So I look forward to that.
Yeah. Well, please like and subscribe, and please feel free to check out some of our other previous 100+ episodes.
Yes.
You can catch us on YouTube as well as Roku. We have a Roku channel, and we're on most of the audio platforms, Corgi Town USA. We will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.